blood on her lips, cracked ribs, and a single word, no. In 1879, South Dakota, Olivia Carter turns down the most powerful ranch family's son and pays for it with her face. She staggers into the dusk with nowhere to go, knowing the law won't save her, and the men hunting her won't stop. Then hoofbeats close in. Is it her attacker coming back to finish the job? Or the one stranger who might change everything? Because what happens next isn't just a rescue. It's a choice that could ignite a war between ranches, destroy reputations, and force Olivia to decide. Surrender to survive, or risk everything for freedom. Lesson: sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse the life that's offered, so you can fight for the life you choose. If you want the full story and how Olivia turns fear into a future, hit like, comment what you'd do in her place, and share this with someone who loves powerful Western drama. And subscribe so you don't miss the ending. Blood dripped from Olivia Carter's split lip while she stumbled from the McAllister ranch house. Every single breath was a struggle, sending a sharp pain through her bruised ribs. It was 1879 in Leeds, South Dakota, and she had just made the riskiest choice of her 22 years by turning down Bartholomew McAllister's proposal of marriage. The son of the ranch owner was not a man who handled rejection well, certainly not from a woman whose family was in debt to his father. Olivia pressed a shaky hand to her face, trying to stop the bleeding. The setting sun threw long, dark shapes across the dusty trail as she pushed forward, with no idea where she was headed. Her family's small homestead was miles off, and her legs felt like they would buckle underneath her. The taste of iron filled her mouth, a harsh reminder of what her defiance had cost her. "I will teach you to make a fool of me in front of my own father," Bartholomew had hissed, his handsome face twisted in pure rage right before his fist struck her jaw. No woman says no to a McAllister. She had actually believed him when he asked her to join him for dinner at the ranch, claiming he wanted to help her family with their financial troubles. But instead, he had offered a cold, loveless marriage, promising to forgive their debt if she agreed to be his wife. When she refused, his true colors showed themselves in a flash of violence. The sound of approaching hooves sent a jolt of pure terror through Olivia. She feared Bartholomew had decided she needed another lesson. She tried to move faster, but her ankle turned, and she nearly collapsed onto her knees. "Whoa there, Marigold!" a deep voice called out, not to her, but to his horse. The man slowed his horse as he drew near, and Olivia could only hope he was not one of the McAllister's men. Owen Miller brought his chestnut mare to a stop the moment he saw the woman on the road. At 26, he had seen plenty of hardship out on the frontier, but the sight of her battered condition woke something fierce inside him. He swung down from the saddle in one smooth movement, his spurs clinking as his boots met the hard-packed earth. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, though the answer was plain as day. As he got closer, he could see her face was a mess of new bruises, with her bottom lip split wide open and swollen. Dried blood streaked down her chin, and her simple blue dress was ripped at the shoulder. Olivia flinched as he reached for her, causing Owen to pull his hand back right away. "I am not going to hurt you," he said gently, his voice soft like he was calming a spooked horse. "My name is Owen Miller. I work over at the Thompson Ranch just north of town." "Olivia Carter," she said, her voice so quiet it was almost lost in the breeze. She swayed on her feet, and Owen moved in without thinking to keep her steady. "Who did this to you, Miss Carter?" Olivia paused for a moment. The McAllisters practically owned the whole county and kept the local sheriff on their payroll. Accusing them of anything was a dangerous game, maybe even more dangerous than the beating she had already taken. "It does not matter," she finally whispered. Owen's jaw set hard. He had heard the talk about Bartholomew McAllister's nasty temper, particularly around women. Was it the McAllister boy? The immediate fear that flashed in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Owen looked back in the direction of the McAllister ranch, then up at the dimming sky. If Bartholomew had an ounce of shame, he might ride out looking for her, either to finish his cruel work or to make sure she kept her mouth shut. "Miss Carter, "You need to see a doctor," Owen stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And you need a safe place to go." "I have nowhere," Olivia confessed, tears finally starting to well up in her eyes. "My parents' farm is too far to walk, and I cannot—" Her words trailed off as she winced from a sharp intake of breath. Owen made up his mind right then and there. A choice that would change both of their futures. "My sister has a room available in town. She is a widow and runs a small boarding house. She will look after you." Before Olivia could even answer, the faint sound of hoofbeats carried on the wind. Owen did not waste time asking for her consent. In one swift move, he lifted her onto his horse, noticing how she bit her lip to stop a cry of pain. He swung up behind her, wrapping one arm firmly around her waist. "Hold on tight," he said softly, then nudged Marigold into a run, heading away from the McAllister land and toward the safety of Lead. Olivia was suddenly pressed against the solid, warm body of a complete stranger, escaping from the very man her parents had wished she would marry. The twisted situation was not lost on her, even through the fog of her pain. She had always wanted a life of adventure, something more than just being a rancher's wife in this forgotten part of the Dakota Territory. Now, all she had were the clothes she was wearing and the help of a cowboy she had only just met. They rode hard for almost a full hour, taking a roundabout path to make sure no one was following them. By the time they got to the edge of Lead, the sun had completely set. The little mining town was buzzing with the sounds of piano music from the saloons and miners calling it a day. Owen steered Marigold down the back alleys, staying clear of the main street where they might be spotted. He finally reined in behind a simple two-story building with a small sign that read, "Carter Boarding House." "This is my sister's place," Owen said as he dismounted, then carefully helped Olivia down. Her legs gave out the moment her feet hit the ground and he had to catch her. "Easy does it." The back door swung open before Owen could even knock. A slender woman with the same dark brown eyes as her brother stood there. Margaret Miller Carter, who was no relation to Olivia, saw the injured young woman in her brother's arms and immediately waved them inside without a single word. "What in the world happened?" she asked as soon as they were inside the warm kitchen. "McAllister's son," Owen answered with a grim look. "She needs a doctor, Maggie." "Dr. Patterson is over at the Wilson place, helping with their new baby," Margaret said, already soaking a clean rag to gently clean Olivia's cuts. "He will not be back until the morning. Let us get her upstairs. I have a room free." The room was small but tidy, with a simple bed and a washstand. Margaret helped Olivia get out of her ripped dress while Owen waited in the hall. The full extent of her injuries became obvious as Margaret carefully washed the blood from Olivia's face and wrapped her ribs. "He did this to me because I refused to marry him," Olivia explained in a low voice. "My father had to borrow money from his father last winter after the crops died. We have been trying to pay him back, but—" "Say no more," Margaret cut in. "I know exactly how the McAllisters do business. You are safe in this house for it now." When Owen was let back into the room, Olivia was dressed in one of Margaret's nightgowns, her golden hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Even with the bruises, he could not help but see how beautiful she was. Not just pretty, but truly striking, with bright blue eyes that still had a flicker of defiance in them. "Thank you," Olivia said, her gaze meeting his from where she sat on the bed. "I am not sure what would have happened to me if you had not shown up." Owen shuffled his feet, feeling awkward under her thankful stare. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," she replied, a sad smile touching her split lip. "They would not have. Not when it involves the McAllisters." He knew she was telling the truth. The McAllisters had so much influence in the county that most folks just looked the other way when they stepped out of line. Owen was never one to shy away from a confrontation, but he was not naive enough to think there would not be trouble from this. "You should get some rest," he said. "I will stop by tomorrow and see how you are doing." After Owen was gone, Margaret helped Olivia settle into bed, giving her a little laudanum to help with the pain. As she drifted off to sleep, Olivia could not help but wonder what was going to happen. Her parents would be sick with worry when she did not return home, and they had no way to know where she had gone. And as soon as Bartholomew found out she was gone, there was no telling what he might try to do. The medicine finally pulled her into a deep and blessedly empty sleep. Owen rode back to the Thompson ranch with a heavy heart. He had been working there for 3 years, ever since he headed west from Pennsylvania after the war. Samuel Thompson was a decent boss who paid a fair wage and treated his men right, the complete opposite of Victor McAllister, whose cruelty was as vast as his fortune. The bunkhouse was quiet by the time Owen got there, as most of the other hands were already asleep. He took care of Marigold before ducking inside, hoping he would not have to answer any questions about his whereabouts. "You are late for supper," a voice spoke from the shadows. It was Patrick Donovan, Owen's best friend on the ranch, still up and smoking his pipe by the window. "Had business in town?" "Something like that," Owen said, taking off his gun belt and hanging it on a hook. "Business that puts blood on your shirt?" Patrick asked in a low voice. Owen looked down at the dark spots on his sleeve from where he had held Olivia. "It is not my blood." Patrick watched him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "McAllister trouble?" "How did you know?" "News gets around. Bartholomew has been boasting all over that he is going to marry the Carter girl from near Silver Creek. I figured that was not very likely from what I have heard about her." Owen dropped onto his bunk with a heavy sigh. "He beat her pretty bad when she said no. I found her on the road halfway to town." Patrick let out a low whistle. "Well, you have really gone and done it now, my friend. Where is she?" "At my sister's place. She is safe for now." "For now," Patrick repeated. "McAllister will not be happy about someone sticking their nose in his son's business." Owen's jaw clenched. "I do not give a damn what makes him happy." "Maybe so, but Thompson might. We have to use McAllister land for the cattle drive next month." He was right. The Thompson herd had to cross McAllister property to get to the railhead in Cheyenne. Without that path, they would be forced to take a much longer route that would cost them dearly in both time and money. Owen made up his mind that he would speak to Thompson first thing in the morning. He was going to make him see reason. Patrick just shook his head. "There is seeing reason, and then there is running a business. You had better watch your step, Miller. That young woman might not be worth your position here." But while Owen was lying in his bunk that night, staring up at the wood planks above, he could not shake the image of Olivia's eyes. It was not just fear he saw in them, but a stubborn fire that even Bartholomew's brutality could not put out. Something about her called to him, a feeling he could not quite put a name to. He knew Patrick had a point about the danger, but a deeper instinct told him Olivia Carter was worth whatever trouble came with her. Morning arrived far too quickly for Olivia, and with it came the full, aching reality of her injuries. Every single breath was a sharp reminder of her ribs, and her face felt tight and swollen. Margaret brought in a breakfast tray and helped her wash, her hands moving with a soft and practiced care. "My brother will stop by later today," Margaret mentioned while she gently brushed Olivia's hair. "And Dr. Patterson said he would look in on you after his morning visits." "I have to get a message to my folks," Olivia said with worry. "They are going to imagine the worst has happened." Margaret stopped brushing for a moment. "Something awful did happen, my dear, but I will have a boy take a note out to them. Where is their farm located?" "It is on Silver Creek, about 10 miles east of here. The little homestead with the big red barn." "I know the one," Margaret said with a nod. "I will be careful. The last thing we need is for the McAllisters to hear that you are staying with us." A knot of fear tightened in Olivia's stomach just thinking about Bartholomew finding out where she was hiding. "What am I supposed to do? I cannot stay here forever, but I cannot go back to my home either. He will come looking for me." Margaret moved to the side of the bed and took Olivia's hand into her own. "We will take this one day at a time. Your first job is to heal. After that, we will figure out what comes next." Dr. Patterson came by in the middle of the morning. He was a kind-looking older gentleman with a gentle touch and a direct way of speaking. He told her what Margaret had already guessed. "You have 2 cracked ribs and some serious bruising, but thankfully nothing is permanently broken." "You are a lucky one, Miss Carter." he said while he put his instruments back into his bag. I have seen the damage that McAllister boy can do when he truly lets his temper fly. The doctor's casual remark about Bartholomew's reputation sent a chill down Olivia's spine. How many other women had he hurt? Does the town sheriff know about him? She asked. Dr. Patterson's face grew serious. Sheriff Davis knows, all right, but his pockets are lined with Victor McAllister's money. I would not count on finding any justice in that office. Once the doctor was gone, Olivia sat near the window watching the busy street down below. The town of Lead had sprung up almost overnight after gold was found in the Black Hills. Even though the land still legally belonged to the Lakota people from the Fort Laramie Treaty, the town was a messy collection of real businesses, rough-hewn miners' shacks, and the saloons that always seemed to appear wherever men were chasing a fortune. She was so deep in her own thoughts that she never heard the door creak open. She only realized Owen was there when he gently cleared his throat. He stood there in his doorway holding his hat, his dark hair still a little damp from being washed. "Miss Carter," he said with a polite nod, "how are you feeling this afternoon?" "Like I got caught in a cattle stampede," she answered, trying for a small smile that made her face ache. "But I am doing better than I was yesterday, all thanks to you." Owen walked into the room and took the chair Margaret had placed for him. Margaret then quietly slipped out, leaving the door slightly ajar to be proper. "I had a talk with my boss this morning," Owen began, turning his hat over and over in his hands. "I told him everything that happened." Olivia felt herself grow tense. And what was his response? "He is not pleased about this trouble with the McAllisters. We are counting on their help with the big cattle drive." Owen noticed the flicker of fear in her eyes and quickly added, "But he is a decent man. He said he would not abandon somebody who is in real trouble." "I do not want to be a burden to you," Olivia said. "You have already done so much for me." "I have not done much of anything," Owen replied. "And whatever happens from here, I want to see you through it." Their eyes met for a long moment, and a silent understanding seemed to pass between them. Olivia felt a strange flutter deep in her chest that had nothing to do with her bruised ribs. This man, a complete stranger who had stepped in to save her, seemed truly concerned about her without asking for a single thing in return. Their quiet moment was broken when Margaret rushed back in, her face etched with worry. "There is a man downstairs asking around about a young woman who fits Olivia's description. He is one of McAllister's ranch hands." Owen shot to his feet in an instant. "Did he see you come up here?" Margaret shook her head. "No, he was talking with Mr. Roberts over at the general store. I just happened to overhear them while I was getting some things." "They are searching for me," Olivia whispered, the panic rising in her voice. "What if they decide to look in this boarding house?" "They just might," Owen said with a grim look. "And that means you cannot stay here any longer. But where will I go?" The ache in her side seemed to grow sharper with her fear. Owen and Margaret shared a quick glance, a whole conversation passing between the brother and sister without a single word. "The Thompson Ranch," Owen said finally. "It is a good ways out of town, and McAllister would need a very good excuse to ride onto our land. I cannot ask them to do that." "You would not be asking," Owen promised her. "Mrs. Thompson can always use an extra hand with the house and her children. The last girl she had just left to get married a month ago." Olivia thought about it for a second. Going to the Thompson Ranch would put even more distance between her and her family, but it also offered safety. And if she was being completely honest with herself, the idea of being near Owen gave her a strange sense of peace. When would we have to leave? "Tonight," Owen decided. "After it gets dark. I will bring the wagon around back. Do you think you can ride by then?" Olivia nodded, even though she was not sure at all. "I will find a way." The rest of the afternoon was spent in a quiet flurry of getting ready. Margaret helped Olivia change into a dress from her own wardrobe. The skirt was a little too short for Olivia's taller frame, but it would have to do. They put together a small bag with a few essentials, and Margaret wrote a longer letter to Olivia's parents to explain what was happening and to assure them she was all right. By the time the sun went down, Olivia was prepared to leave, though every little move was still painful. She gave Margaret a tight hug, thanking her again for the enormous risk she had taken by hiding her. "My brother is a good man," Margaret whispered into her ear. "One of the finest I know. You can trust him." Owen showed up with the wagon just after dark, pulling into the alley behind the boarding house. He gently helped Olivia climb into the back, where he had laid out a thick bed of blankets to soften the bumps of the journey. "Lie down flat and pull this over you," he said quietly, giving her a heavy tarp. "It is just in case we meet anyone on the trail." The ride to the Thompson ranch was long and rough. Every jolt of the wagon sent a fresh wave of pain through Olivia's body. But Owen drove with great care, choosing a longer route that stayed off the main roads where they might run into McAllister's men. It was long after midnight when they finally pulled up to the ranch. The main house was completely dark except for one lone lamp that glowed in the kitchen window. Owen helped Olivia down from the wagon, taking most of her weight as she tried to get her legs to work after being still for so long. "Mrs. Thompson is waiting up for us," he said in a low voice. I explained the whole situation to her this morning. Elena Thompson was in the kitchen, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and a way about her that showed she did not waste time. She took one look at Olivia's bruised and swollen face and made a disapproving sound with her tongue. "That McAllister boy needs a good hiding," she announced, as she helped Olivia into a kitchen chair. "I have already made up the little room at the back of the house. It has no windows that face the road, so you will have your privacy there." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," Olivia said, her voice full of emotion at the woman's quick acceptance. "I don't rightly know how I can repay your kindness." "Nonsense. Any person with a good heart would do the very same. Besides, I need a hand with the children in the house. My Sarah is only 12, too young to handle it all, and I surely cannot be in two places at one time." Owen lingered uneasily by the door. "I reckon I should get back to the bunkhouse before anyone notices I am gone." "Of course, Mr. Miller," Mrs. Thompson said with a nod. "I will take good care of Miss Carter." As Owen started to go, Olivia called out, "Mr. Miller?" He turned back and she spoke softly. "Thank you for everything." He gave a single nod, a faint smile pulling at his mouth for just a second before he vanished into the night. Mrs. Thompson led Olivia to a small, clean room with a simple bed and a chest for her things. "Get some rest, child. Tomorrow is a new day to figure everything out." Worn out from the long journey and the throbbing pain, Olivia fell into a deep sleep the moment her head met the pillow. She dreamed of running through fields that stretched on forever, a rider with no face chasing her down, until a man she could not see swept her onto another horse, and his presence was an immediate comfort. She woke up to sunshine pouring through the curtains and the cheerful sound of children playing outside her window. For a second, she was lost, the new room making no sense to her sleepy mind. Then, a sharp pain in her side brought back everything that had happened. A gentle knock came at the door right before Mrs. Thompson walked in, carrying a tray with breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Carter. I figured you might want to eat in here today." "Thank you," Olivia said, trying to sit up straight. "But please call me Olivia." "And you can call me Eleanor," the older woman answered with a warm smile. "Now you eat all of this. You will need your strength to heal up properly." After her meal, Eleanor brought her 3 children to meet Olivia. There was Sarah, the oldest at 12, Daniel, a serious 10-year-old boy, and Emma, a bright-eyed 6-year-old who took a liking to Olivia right away, curious about her bruises and full of questions that Eleanor gently steered away. "Once you are feeling stronger, you can help me with the house and the children's lessons," Eleanor explained. "My husband Samuel is usually busy with the ranch, and I handle the books and letters." "I would be happy to help any way I can," Olivia promised her. "I taught at the school in Lead for a time, before her father's farm failed, before the money trouble started, before Bartholomew McAllister decided he wanted her, seeing her not as a person but as a prize to be won." Eleanor seemed to read her mind and understand her unspoken words. "Well, the children will surely learn a lot from you then. For now, just rest. That is the doctor's orders." Olivia spent the day recovering, sitting on the small back porch of the house, where she was tucked away from the main yard. The Thompson ranch was not as big as the McAllister property, but it was well kept, with tidy buildings and healthy-looking animals. From her spot, she could see the distant shapes of cowboys working the cattle, but she could not find Owen among them. She felt a pang of disappointment at his absence, then immediately scolded herself for the feeling. Owen Miller was simply being a good man to someone in trouble. She had no reason to expect anything more from him, or to wish for it. And yet, when he came to the main house for supper that evening, invited by Eleanor to eat with the family instead of the other ranch hands, Olivia could not stop the warmth that bloomed in her chest at the sight of him. He had washed up, his dark hair was still a bit damp, and he wore a clean blue cotton shirt. He gave her a polite nod as he sat down across the table. "Miss Carter, it is good to see you are up and about." "Thanks to you, Mr. Miller," she answered. Samuel Thompson, a weathered man with kind wrinkles around his eyes, took in the exchange with a curious look, but did not say a word. All through the meal, Olivia felt Owen's eyes on her from time to time, though he mostly talked with Samuel about ranch work. After supper, while Eleanor was putting the children to bed, Samuel asked Owen to join him for a smoke on the front porch. Olivia stayed at the table helping Sarah clear off the dishes, even though the girl insisted she should be resting. Through the open window, she could hear what the men were saying. "McAllister sent one of his fellows over today," Samuel said, his voice low. "He was asking if we had seen a young woman with golden hair. Claimed she was his son's fiancée and had run off." "What did you tell him?" Owen's voice was tight with tension. "I told him I mind my own business, and I expect other folks to do the same." Samuel took a pause. "But this is not going to be the end of it. Victor McAllister is not a man who accepts no for an answer, and his son is just the same." "What are you getting at?" "I'm not getting at anything, just telling you the facts. The girl can stay here as long as she needs to, but we had better be ready for trouble." Olivia's hands started to shake as she dried a plate. The McAllisters were searching for her, just like she had feared. How long would it be before they came checking the Thompson ranch, and what would happen to these good people when they did? Her worried thoughts were broken by Owen stepping into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw her, and a look of concern washed over his face. "You heard?" he asked. Olivia just nodded. "I cannot stay here. I'm putting all of you in danger." "That is nonsense," Eleanor said firmly from the doorway, having heard her. "This is our home, and we are the ones who decide who stays in it. The McAllisters do not own this land." "But they are powerful people," Olivia argued. "They could cause trouble for your husband, for the ranch." "Let them try," Eleanor said, a surprising strength in her voice. "Samuel Thompson does not scare easy, and neither do I." Owen moved a little closer to Olivia. "Mrs. Thompson is right. You are safer here than you would be anywhere else right now." The conviction in his voice helped calm her down. "Thank you, all of you." Later that night, as Olivia was getting ready for bed, she heard a soft knock on her door. She opened it and found Owen standing in the hall, looking a little awkward. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right," he said. "After what you heard out there." "I am fine," she told him, even though it was not completely true. "I'm just worried about causing problems for people who have been so very kind to me." Owen's expression softened. "The Thompsons know exactly what they are doing, and so do I." "Why are you helping me?" Olivia asked, the question suddenly tumbling out. "You do not even know me." He looked surprised by her directness. "I know enough," he said after a moment. "I know you did not deserve what was done to you. And I know I cannot just stand by and watch when someone is suffering." There was a whole story in those words Olivia could tell. Something from his own life that made him so determined to do right. But before she could ask, he took a step back. "Good night, Miss Carter." "Olivia," she corrected him gently. "Please, call me Olivia." A small smile touched his lips. "Olivia. Good night." "Good night, Owen." As she shut the door, Olivia realized it was the first time she had said his first name. The name felt natural on her tongue, comfortable, like it had belonged there her whole life. The next week went by in a calm and steady way as Olivia's body started to mend. The dark bruises on her face softened to a pale yellow, and the sharp pain in her ribs eased into a dull ache that only bothered her if she moved too fast. She started helping with the children's school lessons in the mornings and gave Eleanor a hand with chores in the afternoons. Owen came to the main house for supper every evening, a special invitation from Samuel Thompson, who seemed to understand without anyone saying a word that something was growing between his ranch hand and their house guest. Their talks during meals were always polite, but there was a current of unspoken feelings between them as they slowly learned about each other, piece by piece. She found out that Owen had fought for the Union side in the war, even though he was barely 17 when he joined, having lied about his age. He came out west after it was all over, feeling like he could not fit back into his old life in Pennsylvania. He did not talk much about his family, and Olivia had a feeling there were some old wounds there that had not quite healed. In return, she told him about her own childhood on a small farm near Silver Creek. She told him about the short time she spent teaching school in Lead, and her dreams of one day seeing more of the world than just the Dakota Territory. "Why did you stay there?" he asked one evening as they sat on the back porch after supper. The children were asleep, and the Thompsons had kindly left them alone, staying inside the kitchen but still nearby. "My parents needed me," Olivia explained, her eyes on the setting sun as it painted the hills in shades of gold and red. "After my brother passed from a fever 2 years ago, they were just lost. I could not bring myself to leave them then." Owen nodded, showing he understood. "And now?" She turned her head to look at him, struck once more by the quiet strength in his face. "Now, I do not know what is next. I cannot go back home. Bartholomew would surely find me there, and I cannot stay here forever, living on the Thompsons' kindness." "You are not living on their kindness," Owen said right away. "They appreciate your help with the children. Mrs. Thompson says Sarah has learned more from you in 1 week than she did in 3 months at the town school." A small smile touched Olivia's lips at the compliment. "Still, this cannot be my home forever, and the McAllisters are not just going to forget about me." Owen's face grew serious. "No, they will not." They sat quietly for a minute, the heavy weight of her uncertain future hanging in the air between them. "There is a letter for you," Owen finally said, reaching into his pocket. "It is from your parents. One of our men picked it up in town today." Olivia took the envelope with trembling fingers. "Thank you." Owen stood up to go, saying, "I will give you some privacy." "No." Olivia grabbed his hand without a second thought. "Please, stay." He settled back into his chair, and his hand felt warm in hers. She used her free hand to open the letter, not wanting to let go of their connection. The note was short, but filled with emotion. Her parents were thankful she was safe, but they were also scared to death of what the McAllisters could do. Victor McAllister had already shown up at their farm. He threatened to call in their debt right away if Olivia did not come back to marry his son. They did not have the money, which meant they would lose the farm. "He is using them to get to me," Olivia whispered as tears welled up in her eyes. "I cannot let them lose everything just because of what I chose." Owen gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "What are you thinking about?" "That maybe I ought to go back and just agree to what he wants." The words felt like poison in her mouth. "No." Owen's answer was instant and firm. "That is not an option." "Then what should I do?" Olivia shot back, a wave of anger cutting through her fear. "Just let my parents lose their home? Let the McAllisters ruin their lives because of me?" Too proud to accept a proposal. "It was not pride." Owen's voice cut through the air, sharp as a whip. "It was survival. Do you have any idea what kind of man Bartholomew is? The kind of husband he would be?" His words sliced right through her anger and hit the bone. She had seen the real Bartholomew the moment his hand struck her face. She knew a life with him would mean the slow, painful death of her spirit. "There has to be another way," Owen said, his voice softening. "How much do your folks owe?" $300, Olivia whispered. "It might as well have been 3,000. They could never pay it." Owen went quiet for a long moment, lost in thought. I have some money saved up. It is not enough, but it is a start. Olivia just stared at him, stunned. You would do that for people you have never even met? His gaze met hers, steady and sure. For you, Olivia. I would do it for you. That simple promise stole the air from her lungs. No man had ever looked at her like Owen was looking at her then. He looked at her like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. Before she could find her words, Samuel Thompson filled the doorway. Miller, there is a rider coming. Looks like one of McAllister's men. Owen was on his feet in a flash, his hand dropping to the pistol on his hip. Get inside, he told Olivia. You stay with Mrs. Thompson. Her heart hammered against her ribs as Olivia rushed into the house. Elena was waiting for her in the kitchen, her own shotgun leaning against the wall. The children? Olivia asked. Asleep upstairs, Elena answered. Sarah knows to keep them in the back room if trouble starts. They waited in a silence so thick you could feel it, listening for the voices outside. It felt like a lifetime before they heard the sound of a horse riding away. Samuel and Owen came back inside. It was McAllister's foreman, Samuel said, his face grim. He was carrying a message for Miss Carter. What message? Olivia asked, a cold dread creeping into her stomach. Bartholomew wants to meet, Owen said, his jaw set like stone. Tomorrow at noon, on neutral ground at the church in Lead. It is a trap, Elena said right away. You cannot go. Cannot? If I do not go, he will know I am here, Olivia argued. He could come back with more men and try to force his way in. Let him try, Samuel said, his hand resting on his gun. No, Olivia said, shaking her head. I will not have any more violence on my account. There has been more than enough already. Owen looked at her, studying her face. You are not really thinking about going, are you? I am thinking that I need to end this, one way or another. Then I am going with you, Owen said, his tone leaving no room for argument. We both are, Samuel added. McAllister's boy is a lot less likely to try something foolish with witnesses around. Olivia looked from one man to the other, feeling a wave of gratitude so strong it almost brought her to tears. Thank you, she said, because there were no other words for what she felt. Sleep would not come for her that night. She lay awake in the dark, her mind turning over the meeting to come. She wondered what it would mean for her future. Would Bartholomew try to bargain with her, or threaten her parents again? Would he try to take her by force? And then there was Owen, the way he looked at her, the things he had said. She wondered if it was possible that right in the middle of all this danger, she had found something she had not even known she was missing. The morning arrived far too soon. Elena helped Olivia get ready in her best borrowed dress, a simple blue one that made her eyes sparkle. Her face was starting to heal. The bruises had faded to a pale yellow, faint enough to hide with just a little powder. Remember, Elena said, pinning Olivia's hair in place, you have choices. No matter what happens out there today, you do not have to face it by yourself. Owen and Samuel were waiting by the wagon. They were both armed, their faces serious. Owen helped Olivia onto the wagon seat, and his hand stayed on hers a moment longer than it had to. Stay close to me, he whispered, no matter what. The ride to Lead was heavy with silence. Nobody spoke much. Olivia's thoughts were racing, playing out one bad ending after another. By the time the tall steeple of the church appeared over the horizon, her hands were shaking in her lap. Owen saw and gently covered them with his own. It is going to be all right, he promised, even though they both knew it was a promise he could not keep. The church was a plain white building at the edge of town, with a small cemetery next to it. Bartholomew McAllister was waiting on the steps. He had two of his father's ranch hands with him. His handsome face was tight with anger, and he looked like he had not slept in days. A small part of Olivia was glad to know she had ruined his peace, just as much as he had ruined hers. Samuel stopped the wagon a good distance away. Owen jumped down first. He helped Olivia down, keeping her sheltered behind him as they walked closer. Samuel followed right behind them, his hand resting near his gun. Olivia, Bartholomew called out, completely ignoring the men with her. You have led me on quite a chase. I never intended to be chased, Mr. McAllister, she answered, her voice surprisingly steady. What is it that you want? Her directness seemed to make him even angrier. I want what is rightfully mine. You agreed to marry me. I did no such thing, Olivia shot back. I told you no, and then you hit me. Bartholomew's eyes flicked over to Owen, then back to her. I see you found yourself a protector. How sweet. He said the word like it was an insult. Does he know you are practically promised to another man? There is no engagement, Olivia said, her voice firm. There never was. Your parents seem to think otherwise, Bartholomew said, with a cold smirk. They have already told several neighbors about our upcoming wedding. Are you going to make liars out of them? That was a lie, Olivia thought. Her parents would never do that without her saying yes, but she understood his game. He was trying to trap her by using her family's good name and their money troubles against her. Owen stepped forward, his patience gone. Enough of these games, McAllister. Miss Carter has told you her answer. She is not marrying you. Bartholomew's face grew dark. This has nothing to do with you, cowboy. This is between me and my fiancée. She is not your fiancée, Owen bit out. And it became my business the second I found her beaten on the side of the road. The two men stood facing each other, and the air between them crackled like a coming storm. Olivia was afraid they were about to start throwing punches right there on the church steps. Stop it, both of you, she said, stepping right between them. She turned to look Bartholomew straight in the eye. I will never marry you, Mr. McAllister, not if you were the last man in the entire Dakota Territory. Bartholomew's face twisted with fury. For a second, Olivia thought he was going to hit her again right there in front of everyone. But he reined himself in, though she could see the effort it took. Your parents owe my father a great deal of money, he said, his voice like ice. Without my help, they will lose their ranch. Is your pride worth their home? Before Olivia could answer, Samuel Thompson took a step forward. I believe I might have a solution to that little problem. Every eye in the place turned to the old rancher. He just stood there calmly and went on. I have been looking to grow my herd. Mr. McAllister has some fine breeding stock I have been interested in. I am prepared to make him an offer that would more than settle the Carter family's debt. Bartholomew looked completely stunned. My father does not sell to his competition. Business is business, Samuel answered smoothly, and I am offering well above what they are worth. Your father is a lot of things, but he is no fool when it comes to money. Olivia just stared at Samuel, amazed. He was offering to save her parents, and in doing so, he was risking his own relationship with the most powerful rancher in the county. Bartholomew must have known he was losing. His eyes narrowed as he looked from Owen to Olivia, seeing how close they were standing, seeing how Owen's hand rested on the small of her back, protecting her. I see what is going on here, he said, and a nasty understanding dawned on his face. You have already found yourself a new man. Tell me, Olivia, does he know about your condition? Olivia went cold all over. What condition? Bartholomew smiled, but it was a cold, ugly thing. Why, the fact that you are carrying my child, of course. The lie was so monstrous, so completely out of nowhere, that all Olivia could do was stand there with her mouth open. She felt Owen tense up beside her, and she could feel his doubt sharp as a needle. That is not true, she finally choked out, her voice trembling with rage. How dare you? We did spend some time alone at my father's ranch, Bartholomew said, his voice smooth as oil. Who is to say what these good people will believe, especially in a few months when your belly starts to get bigger? The threat was clear as day. He was going to ruin her name. He would spread a lie that would make everyone turn their back on her, a lie that would make it impossible for her to ever marry. In 1879, in the Dakota Territory, there were not many fates worse than that for a woman. Before Olivia could say another word, Owen stepped forward. His face was a cold, hard mask of fury. If you breathe one word of that lie about Miss Carter, you will have to answer to me. And to me, Samuel added, his hand now resting on his pistol for all to see. Bartholomew finally seemed to understand that he had gone too far. The smug look on his face started to fade. "This is not over," he warned, backing away toward his horse. "My father will never do business with the Thompson Ranch after this. And you," he said, pointing a finger at Olivia, "you will regret the day you chose a common cowboy over a McAllister." They stood in a tense silence and watched as Bartholomew and his men got on their horses and rode off, kicking up a cloud of dust. As soon as they were gone, Olivia's legs felt like they were about to give out. Owen grabbed her arm to steady her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. "Yes," she said, though her heart was still pounding. "Thank you. Thank you both so much." Samuel just gave a slow nod. "Let us get you back to the ranch. I need to send a letter to Victor McAllister about that cattle deal before his son gets the chance to poison the well." The ride home was even quieter than the ride there. Each of them was lost in thought, turning over everything that had taken place. Olivia could tell that Owen was acting distant. The warmth he had shown earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet pensiveness that made her uneasy. Once they got to the ranch, Samuel headed straight for his office to write his letter. That left Olivia and Owen standing alone beside the wagon. "Owen," Olivia said softly when the silence between them felt too heavy to bear. "What is on your mind?" He paused for a moment, his gaze not quite meeting hers. "Nothing. I need to go check on Marigold. This morning she seemed to be favoring her front left leg." Before Olivia could say another word, he turned and headed for the stables, leaving her standing there by herself, feeling lost and confused. A few moments later, Alina found her in the exact same spot. What in the world happened? Did that McAllister stir up some trouble? Olivia told her the whole story, from Bartholomew's threats and Samuel's surprising offer to the awful lie he told to tarnish her name. As Olivia spoke, Elena's face grew more and more furious. The nerve of that man, she huffed after Olivia had finished, to say something so vile right there in front of the church of all places. "I think Owen believed him," Olivia said in a small voice, letting out the real reason for her pain. "He has hardly even looked my way since then." Elena's eyes filled with understanding. "Oh, honey, men can be such fools. Just give him some time to sort it out in his head. Owen Miller has more sense than most. He will figure out the truth." But Owen did not join them for supper that evening. He sent a message saying he was needed to stand night watch over the herd. Olivia just pushed her food around her plate with no appetite at all. She was sick with worry that Bartholomew's lie had poisoned whatever was starting to grow between her and Owen before it ever had a chance to blossom. The next morning, she was in the middle of helping Sarah with a reading lesson when a racket started up in the yard. She peered out the window and saw a wagon pulling up. It was driven by a middle-aged couple she knew in an instant. "My parents," she breathed out, letting the book fall from her hands as she raced for the door. Olivia's mother, Rebecca Carter, was climbing down from the wagon before it even came to a full stop, her arms wide open to pull her daughter into a tight hug. Her father, John, followed a bit slower, his weathered face etched with deep emotion. "Oh, Libby," Rebecca cried out, holding Olivia back to look over her healing bruises. "What that monster did to you?" "I am all right, Mama," Olivia promised her, even as her own tears streamed down her cheeks. "How did you know I was here?" "Mr. Thompson sent a rider out at first light this morning," John explained as he finally reached them, pulling both women into a single embrace. "He said it was finally safe for us to come see you." Elena came to the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, please come on inside. You must be worn out from your trip." As they sat around the kitchen table with coffee, Olivia learned that Samuel had done much more than just ask her parents to visit. He had gone straight to Victor McAllister with an offer for the breeding stock. He made it plain that forgiving the Carter debt had to be part of the bargain. "McAllister actually agreed?" Olivia asked, completely stunned. "He was reluctant," John admitted. "But Mr. Thompson offered him a price that was way more than what we owed. Not even a man like Victor McAllister could say no to that much profit." "What about Bartholomew?" Olivia had to ask. "What did he have to say about this new arrangement?" Rebecca and John shared a quick look. "There was some kind of trouble over at the McAllister ranch last night," Rebecca said, choosing her words with care. We do not know all the details, but the talk around town is that Bartholomew has been sent off to stay with relatives in Denver for a good long while. Olivia felt a huge weight lift right off her shoulders. Bartholomew was gone, for now anyway. Her parents were no longer under the thumb of the McAllisters. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could take a full breath without that tight knot of fear in her chest. "And what about you, Libby?" her father asked. "Will you be coming home now that the trouble has passed?" The question took her by surprise. She had been so caught up in just getting through each day that she had not given a single thought to what would happen next. The simple answer was yes. Of course she would go home. But something, or someone, stopped the word from leaving her lips. I need a little time to think about it," she said at last. "Mrs. Thompson was good enough to offer me a job helping with the children. I would like to stay and see that through for a little while longer." If her parents were surprised she was hesitating, they did a good job of hiding it. They stayed for most of the afternoon, getting caught up on everything that had happened since she had run from home. When they finally got ready to leave, with promises to be back soon, Olivia walked them out to their wagon. "There is something else keeping you here, is there not?" her mother asked in a low voice while John checked the harness. "Or maybe someone?" Olivia felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "Maybe. But I do not know if he feels the same, especially not after what happened yesterday." Rebecca looked closely at her daughter's face. "Is he a good man?" "The very best I've ever known," Olivia answered, without a moment's hesitation. "Then he will come around," her mother said with certainty. "A good man always knows the truth when he sees it." After her parents drove away, Olivia found herself walking toward the stables. She felt a pull, a need to see Owen and to finally clear the air that had grown so thick between them. She found him in a stall, brushing down Marigold, his back turned toward the door. "Your folks seem like good people," he said, not even turning around, but somehow knowing it was her. "They are," Olivia agreed, stepping into the stable. "They wanted me to go back home with them." He finally turned then, his face carefully blank. "Are you going to go?" "I told them I was staying on for a while to help with the children." Owen just nodded and turned his attention back to the horse. "That is decent of you." The space between them felt like a solid wall, turning just a few feet of dusty stable floor into a mile-long canyon. Olivia took a deep breath and closed the distance. "Owen, about what Bartholomew said yesterday." "You do not owe me any kind of explanation," he cut in, his eyes still on the horse. "Yes, I do," she insisted. "Because what you think about me matters." That made him pause. He finally looked up at her, and she could see the trouble in his eyes. "What I think does not change the facts of the matter." "The facts?" Olivia repeated, taking another step closer. "The fact is that Bartholomew McAllister is a liar. I have never been with him or any other man in that way. He was just trying to hurt me, to ruin my name so that no good man would ever have me." Owen's hard expression seemed to soften just a little. "I know. You know?" Olivia blinked, confused. "Then why have you been staying away from me?" He set the brush down on a barrel with slow, deliberate care. "Because knowing it was all a lie does not change how I felt when I heard him say it. I wanted to kill him, Olivia, right then and there on the church steps in front of everyone. That kind of rage. It scared me." And then she understood. Owen was not doubting her at all. He was doubting himself. He was afraid of his own violent thoughts when Bartholomew provoked him. "But you did not do it," she pointed out softly. "You kept yourself in check. Barely." He raked a hand through his hair, a frustrated habit she was starting to know well. "My father was that way. He had a quick temper, and even quicker fists. I promised myself I would never be like him." Olivia moved in closer until she was standing right in front of him. Wanting to protect someone you care for does not make you like your father. It just makes you human. Their eyes locked, and they just stood there looking at each other. Something in Owen's expression changed. The hardness melted away, like he was finally giving in to the feelings that had been growing between them since that first night on the road. "Someone I care for," he repeated in a quiet voice. Is that what you think this is? Is it not? Olivia challenged, her heart hammering against her ribs. Instead of answering with words, Owen slowly reached out his hand, giving her a chance to pull away. When she held her ground, he gently cupped her face in his calloused hands, treating her with a tenderness that was mindful of her still fading bruises. I have been wrestling with this feeling since the day I found you, he confessed, his voice low and thick with emotion. I kept telling myself it was just a sense of duty, the right thing for a man to do. And now, Olivia whispered, her own breath catching in her throat. Now I am finished with fighting it. He drew closer, pausing when his lips were just a whisper from hers. Only if this is what you want as well. In response, Olivia closed the small gap between them. She met his lips with her own in a kiss that began softly but soon grew deeper, as if all those lonely months on the run were melting away into the simple truth of finally being home. When they broke apart, both of them breathing heavily, Owen touched his forehead to hers. All I am is a cowboy with a good horse and whatever pay I can set aside, he cautioned her. It is not much of a life I can offer. You have already given me the only thing that matters, Olivia told him. A future that I get to choose for myself. A true smile broke across Owen's face, transforming his usually serious features and taking years off his age. Well, then, I would surely like to be a part of that future if you will have me. A sound from the stable doorway, like someone clearing their throat, cut their second kiss short. They jumped apart and saw Samuel Thompson standing there, a look of knowing amusement in his eyes. Mrs. Thompson sent me to fetch Miss Carter for the evening meal, he said plainly. Should I let her know you two are otherwise engaged? A deep blush spread across Olivia's face, but Owen just let out a soft laugh, keeping a steady arm around her waist. Tell her we will be along directly, sir. Once Samuel had turned and walked off, Olivia hid her face in Owen's chest. He's going to tell Elena everything. Good, Owen said, which took her by surprise. That will save me the trouble of stating my intentions. Intentions? Olivia leaned back to study his face. That sounds awfully serious, Mr. Miller. It is, Miss Carter, he answered, his gaze becoming earnest. I know this is happening fast. Maybe too fast after all you have endured. But I am not a man who likes to waste daylight once I know what I want. And what is it that you want, she asked, though her heart already knew the answer. You, he said simply, for as long as you are willing to have me. The cottonwood leaves were just beginning to turn to gold when Owen and Olivia got married in the little church in Lead. It was the very same church where Bartholomew MacAllister had made his threats all those months ago. Changing that place from a site of fear into one of celebration felt right, like a mirror of the journey Olivia had taken herself. Elena Thompson had insisted on hosting the wedding dinner at the ranch. She turned the big barn into a beautiful hall, lit with lanterns and decorated with wildflowers. The whole Thompson family was there, along with Olivia's parents, Owen's sister Margaret, and all the ranch hands who had become their friends that summer. Mrs. Miller? Owen whispered in her ear during their first dance as man and wife. How does that name sound to you? It sounds perfect, Olivia said, smiling up at the man who was now her husband. Though I can hardly believe how quickly it all came together. By anyone's measure, it had been a fast courtship. The moment they admitted their feelings, Owen had gone to speak with Samuel Thompson about his plans. To Olivia's astonishment, the rancher had offered the couple a small cabin on his land. It was in need of some repair, but with the help of the other cowboys, Owen fixed the roof and shored up the walls. He added a proper stone chimney and even built a little porch where they could sit together in the evenings. I would have married you the very next day after that first kiss in the stables, Owen confessed to her now, his arms holding her a little tighter. But I figured you deserved a real courtship. 3 months is hardly proper by some folks' standards, Olivia teased him. My mother nearly had a fainting spell when we told her the date, but she came around. She did, Olivia confirmed, her eyes drifting to where her parents stood talking with the Thompsons. I reckon she was just glad to see me truly happy. She was feeling a joy she had not thought was possible anymore. The shadow cast by Bartholomew Mallister had faded away once the news got out that he had been sent to Colorado in disgrace, Victor M. Allister, being a practical man, had put his business interests ahead of his son's bruised ego, and the deal with Samuel Thompson had been completed without a hitch. The Carter family's debt was paid off, and while they were never going to be rich, they were able to keep their farm. Olivia and Owen, meanwhile, were making their own plans. Owen had been made foreman of the Thompson Ranch, a job that brought with it better wages and more responsibility. They were saving every dollar they could, working toward the day they could afford a small piece of land to call their own. "What is on your mind?" Owen asked as their dance ended and they walked toward the edge of the celebration. "The future," Olivia answered with honesty. "From where I am standing, our future looks mighty bright," Owen said, his gaze filled with a kind of love that still made her breath catch. Later that evening, when the party was over and they were finally by themselves in their cabin, Olivia stood at the window, gazing up at the endless blanket of stars. Owen came to stand behind her, sliding his arms around her waist and pulling her close against him. "Have any regrets?" he asked her quietly. Olivia turned in his embrace to look him in the eye. "Not a single one," she promised him. "Although if you had not been on that road that day—" "But I was," Owen said with certainty. "And I will always be there." The promise in his voice gave Olivia a sense of safety she had never known before. Out of a moment of terrible violence that had almost destroyed her, she had found her way to a love that made her stronger than she had ever imagined. "I love you, Owen Miller," she whispered, her lips close to his. "And I love you, Olivia Miller," he answered, just before he lifted his new bride and carried her to their bed. Spring arrived in the Dakota Territory with a burst of green, turning the brown winter prairie into an ocean of wildflowers. Olivia was standing on their cabin porch, one hand resting on her round belly, watching Owen ride back from checking the fence line. The last year had brought so many changes for them both. Owen was thriving as the foreman, earning more of Samuel Thompson's trust and respect with each passing season. Olivia had continued teaching the Thompson children right up until her pregnancy made it too difficult. Now her focus was on getting ready for the baby's arrival, which was only a few weeks away. "How are my two favorite people doing today?" Owen called out as he swung down from his horse, tying Marigold to the hitching rail. "We are restless," Olivia answered with a warm smile. "Your son has been kicking up a storm all morning." "A son, is it?" Owen grinned as he climbed the porch steps to give her a kiss. "Just yesterday you were convinced it was a daughter." "Today I am certain it is a boy, and he has his father's restless energy," Olivia insisted. She took his hand and placed it on her belly so he could feel the movement. Owen's face softened with a look of pure wonder as he felt the kick from their child. Even after all these months, the feeling still filled him with awe every single time. "I finished the cradle," he told her. He led her inside to show her the handcrafted piece sitting in a corner of their cozy home. "Samuel helped me with the rocking part." "Oh, it is beautiful," Olivia said. She ran her hand along the smoothly sanded wood, feeling the love and care that had been put into every joint and curve. "Our baby is lucky to have such a skilled father and such a courageous mother," Owen added, his tone turning more serious. "I do think about it sometimes, how different things might have gone." Olivia knew exactly what he was talking about. The memory of Bartholomew Mac Allister had grown distant, but it had not vanished completely. They had heard through town chatter that he had married the daughter of a banker in Denver, a match that no doubt pleased his father's business ambitions. Olivia could only pray that the poor woman was having an easier time of it than she would have. "We cannot live our lives on what-ifs," she told Owen, repeating a lesson that their shared journey had taught them both. "We can only live in what is." And their life together was a beautiful thing. It was a marriage founded on deep respect and a love that grew stronger every day. They had a home they had built with their own hands, and the promise of a family stretching out before them. 2 weeks later, following a long and difficult labor that pushed Olivia's strength to its limits, their son was born as the sun was first breaking over the eastern hills. They named him Samuel John Miller, to honor both the rancher who gave them a start and Olivia's own father. "He has your eyes," Olivia murmured, exhausted but happy, as Owen held their baby for the first time. His large, capable hands cradled the tiny infant with incredible care. "And he has your stubborn streak," Owen replied, a smile spreading across his face as the baby's tiny hand gripped his finger with surprising force. The little fellow did not want to leave his warm home. Olivia let out a soft laugh, then winced as the small movement reminded her of the ordeal she had just been through. "Can you really blame him? This world is a wild place, but it is a wonderful one too," Owen said. He sat on the side of the bed and gently placed their son into her arms. "And it will be our job to teach him how to find the wonder in it." As she looked down at her child and then up at the man she had chosen to share her life with, Olivia felt a sense of wholeness she never could have imagined on that awful day when Bartholomew Malisister's cruelty sent her running toward an unknown future. "I love you," she said to Owen, the simple words carrying all of her gratitude and joy. "I love you both," he answered, leaning down to kiss her, and then to place a soft kiss on their son's forehead. "My family." When little Samuel was 6 months old, a letter came from Samuel Thompson. The rancher had been speaking with a bank in Cheyenne about growing his operation and had a surprising offer for Owen and Olivia. He wanted to start a second, smaller ranch about 20 miles south, on a piece of land he had just bought. He needed someone he could trust completely to manage it, a fellow who knew his way around both cattle and ledgers. "He is offering us a partnership," Owen told her that evening after Olivia had gone over the letter. "We would live on the land and run the place, and after 5 years we would get a 1/4 share of it." Olivia just looked at him, completely stunned. "A quarter share of a whole ranch? Goodness, that is more than we ever figured on saving." "I know," he said back, his face a blend of pure excitement and deep consideration. "It is a chance of a lifetime, but it means pulling up stakes, making something out of pure dirt and determination. The land has a good creek and plenty of grass, but there is only a tiny bunk cabin there right now." "When have we ever been afraid to start with nothing?" Olivia asked, adjusting their sleeping boy in her arms. "We have done this before." A smile touched Owen's face at her certainty. "It would be our place in a way, not just a shack on another man's property, but something we are working to make our own. Then we have to do it," Olivia said with finality. "Samuel should grow up on a piece of ground his mother and father are fighting to own." They made the journey in the early fall, well before the winter storms would make the trails a misery. The bunk cabin was certainly small, just a single room with a fireplace built from river rock. But Owen was already sketching out in his head the additions that would make it a real home come next summer. The land itself was a beautiful sight, nestled in a valley with a clear stream cutting through it. Hills rose up on the west side, a perfect shield against the bite of the winter wind. A starter herd of cattle had been brought down from the main Thompson ranch, the very beginning of what they hoped would become their own line of stock. On their first night in that new place, after Samuel was sound asleep in the cradle Owen had carefully brought from their old home, Olivia stepped outside. The sky was so thick with stars it simply stole her breath. "Having any second thoughts?" Owen asked. He came up behind her and draped a heavy blanket over her shoulders to ward off the night's chill. "Not a single one," she promised, leaning into his steady frame. "I was just thinking about the road we have traveled. From a girl with a battered face on the side of a trail to a rancher's wife with her own home," Owen reflected, his arms holding her a little tighter. "It has been some journey, and it is only just getting started." Olivia shifted to look at him, her eyes catching the light of the stars. "You know, I never properly said thank you." "For what?" "For looking past the blood and the bruises that day, for actually seeing me." A deep tenderness came over Owen's face. "I saw everything that day, your grit, your resilience, and your beauty no matter what he had done to you." I reckon I started falling for you right in that moment, even if I was too hard-headed to see it then. Well, Mr. Miller, Olivia said, standing on her toes to give him a kiss, I am mighty glad you gave up being so hard-headed. So am I, Mrs. Miller, he whispered back against her lips. So am I. The years rolled by, and their humble start grew into something real and lasting. The bunk cabin expanded into a true ranch house, one room at a time, whenever Owen could steal a moment from his work. Their herd grew bigger and stronger as he put all his hard-earned knowledge from his time with the Thompsons to use. Little Samuel got a sister, Rebecca Eleanor, when he was 3, and a brother, William Owen, came along 2 years after that. Olivia managed her days between raising the children, keeping their house in order, and helping with the ranch books, using the same sharp mind that had made her a fine schoolteacher. They saw their share of trouble, no doubt about it. There was the harsh winter of '86 that almost destroyed the herd. A drought came 2 years later that shrunk the creek to a muddy line, making them worry for their water. And there was the time 5-year-old Samuel took a tumble from a horse and broke his arm, a scare that shook them both to their core. But they met every last challenge side by side, and their bond just got stronger with every trial they overcame. There were also the good times, like the children's first words and wobbly steps, the deep pride that came from seeing their labor pay off in the ranch's growing success. The quiet evenings when the work was done and they could just sit and look at each other with the same affection that had taken root in those first uncertain days. On the 10th anniversary of the afternoon Owen found Olivia on that road, they threw a big party at the ranch. They had the Thompsons out, along with Olivia's folks, Margaret and her new husband, and all the ranch hands who felt more like family now. A toast, Samuel Thompson announced, lifting his glass as everyone gathered around the long table Owen had built just for gatherings like this one. To the best ranch manager in the whole Dakota Territory, and to his incredible wife. What started out as a business deal has become one of the things I'm most proud of. Hear, hear, the others cheered, raising their glasses high. Later on, when the party was thinning out and folks were heading home or to the bunkhouse for the night, Owen found Olivia on the porch swing he had made for her birthday last year. Happy anniversary, he said, sitting down beside her. He offered her a small parcel wrapped in simple brown paper. Owen, you did not have to get me anything. I wanted to, he said softly. Go on, open it. Tucked inside the paper was a small book bound in leather. Olivia opened the cover and saw that the pages were all blank, except for a message written on the very first one. For Olivia, who showed me that the bravest thing a person can do is choose their own way. All my love, Owen. It is beautiful, she said, her finger gently tracing his handwriting. But what is it for? It is for your stories, Owen answered. You have always mentioned wanting to write down the stories you tell the children. I figured it was about time you had a good place to keep them. Her eyes welled up with tears at how thoughtful he was. I do not know what to say. Say you will write down our story, Owen proposed. So our grandkids and even their kids will know how it all got started. With a cowboy who was too decent to ride past someone in need, Olivia said, smiling through her tears. With a woman who was brave enough to say no to the wrong man so she could say yes to the right one, Owen corrected, pulling her in close. Every good thing in my life started with you, Olivia. As the moon climbed high above their ranch, its silver glow washing over the land they had built with their own hands, Olivia laid her head on her husband's shoulder. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heart against her cheek. From a brutal act came a rescue. From that rescue grew a love. And from that love came a family and a future that neither one of them could have ever foreseen on that dusty trail a decade ago. I will write our story, she promised in a quiet voice. Though I'm not sure anybody would believe that the very worst day of my life actually led to the finest years I ever could have wished for. The truth can be a harder thing to swallow than any made-up tale, Owen said, placing a soft kiss on her temple. But it is still the truth. And it had been true for every single step of their life together, from that first terrible meeting to this quiet evening surrounded by everything their shared work had produced. As Olivia gazed out at their home, at the ranch house with warm light spilling from its windows, the barn where the horses were settled, the bunkhouse where their good hands were sleeping, and the far-off fields where their cattle were grazing, she felt a peacefulness so deep and complete that it brought a fresh wave of tears to her eyes. She had been beaten for turning down the son of a rich rancher, and a cowboy had seen her face and taken her away from all that. But the true story, the one she would put down in the book Owen gave her, was about all the days that came after. It was about the love that healed her, the partnership that built their home, and the family they raised together, one day at a time. "I love you, Owen Miller," she whispered, and the words felt as real as they did the very first time she had ever said them. "And I love you, Olivia Miller," he answered. His arms held her securely as they swayed back and forth on the swing. They were two people who had discovered in the other the exact thing they were missing to become whole. He always had loved her, and he always would. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.